Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a new story, Fox Duke of Hell, written by Mightiest Battle. You can find author's profile link in the description. Let's begin. Konoha 3rd POV. A 9-year-old Naruto crawled under a bush to hide from the ANBU attacking him. The Hokage had been dragged into a council meeting, and the ANBU who'd lost family saw their chance. They had burned, cut, and stabbed the boy, but the demon fox used his soul to keep him alive. Naruto lay under the bush crying as he held his face with a deep cut going down his right cheek. The burns on his arms were healing, and the blades in his back were pushed out as the wounds healed. The Kyuubi, with his powers sealed into the siblings, the boy's father and mother, took out of the village. They even took the godparents with them to train the two brats. While he was forced to use his own life force to keep the kid alive. Even in his newly weakened state, the Kyuubi could hear them as they talked. They took the other two kits the boy was born with. Another male and a female, each holding half his power. They believe one of them would be this child of prophecy who'd save the ninja world. The Kyuubi, a Duke of Hell, answered only to Lucifer and his wife and killed everything that ever got in his way. Now, he was stuck in a kit that shouldn't have to go through this. But, the Kyuubi knew that the more of his life force was forced into the boy's system, the more he'd become fox-like. The whisker marks on his face were just the beginning if he had to keep doing this. The Kyuubi could use the last of his real power and fuse them, but that would send the boy back to hell to regain the power they lacked. It would take many years to regain all they'd lost, and the chance existed that he'd vanish after the fusion. It's here. Kyuubi heard that a decision to hell with it. He'd lived for over 1,000 years, much older than most demons. 100 of them sealed away in a DMN human that just wants to use his DMN powers. But this kid wanted nothing to do with this and had no say in anything. The Kyuubi infused all his claws and tails with his soul, ready to stab them into the kit's own soul. Sorry, kit. Naruto panicked and then crawled farther into the bushes before pain shot through the boy's body. And screamed, making the ANBU jump back as a massive chakra blast came from Naruto's body. The bushes and a few were thrown away, and they all saw a seal under his torn-up and burnt shirt. A red dome started forming around him. It's finally showing itself. They were about to attack the dome before the Sandaime Hokage jumped down with ANBU dog and cat at his side. Stop, you fools! But they were all too late. Naruto vanished in a blinding light. It forced them to cover their eyes before a massive blast threw them all away. They looked up as a massive light shot up into the dark night sky. They all looked up and froze as they saw the image of the Kyuubi glaring down at them. It grinned as it looked down at them, planning to scare them all one last time as he felt his soul fading into nothingness. Thanks for freeing me from my cage. After I form, I'm destroy that village with a single attack to show some gratitude. The Kyuubi faded from existence with the joy of seeing the horrified face of the old man who'd failed his jailer. Ruins of Yuzu Minato, Kushina, Tsunade, and Jiraiya were all sitting around a dinner table trying to come up with tomorrow's training. As Minato was about to speak, 2 puffs of smoke came from the middle of the table. In the middle of the smoke were the 2 great sage toads. Lord Fukasaku and Lady Shima. Both looked extremely worried as they looked around. Minato spoke up as he looked at them. Pa, what is wrong? They looked at Minato with panic in their eyes. Minato boy. The great elder toad has said that the child of prophecy has left the living world. Are Memna and Mito okay? All of them froze as they looked at the toads. We put them down to bed not an hour ago. Then who? Kushina was about to speak before the red messenger toad Sarutobi used to get in contact with Jiraiya. He looked down sadly and spoke before he noticed the 2 great sages. Jiraiya, your teacher sent me with a message. Naruto Uzumaki, the son of your late student Minato, has been killed by a rouge squad of ANBU, and the Kyuubi was set free to reform. It has promised the swift destruction of the village as thanks for its freedom. His body had been completely destroyed. Nothing but a destroyed shirt was left after the fox got free. He pulled the burnt, cut up, bloody shirt from his small jacket. It hurt the messenger toad deeply as he looked at the shirt. Such a young life had been lost because of blind rage and hate. When he looked up, he was shocked to see the sages of his home and the now broken people around him. Ma and Pa looked at him, then Pa grew angry as he looked at the shirt. He turned and glared at Minato and Jiraiya, scaring both men. "Who is this Naruto boy? You had another tadpole, and we weren't told." Ma started to cry as she took the shirt with shaky hands. She was known for her great love for all the tadpoles of her clan. And to learn one had met with such a violent end at such a young age broke her heart. Of the clan or not, a child's death was to be mourned. Minato couldn't respond as he sat there frozen. And Kushina had fallen from her chair from the shocking news of her apparent firstborn death. Tears came to her eyes, and she covered her mouth and shook her head. Minato came out of his shock and spoke. "This wasn't what we planned. Naruto was supposed to be seen as a hero like Mena and Midaware to be when we return." Already angry, Pa jumped up, grabbed the fourth Hokage's collar, and pulled him down as he landed. "You left your tadpole to his death, you DMN fool. How could you value two others over one?" Pa shook Minato as Ma ripped into Kushina and Jiraiya. Tears ran down her face as she screamed, holding the shirt to her chest as she yelled. "You stupid girl and you DMN pervert. You let a young tadpole be left defenseless in a place you should have known was dangerous for him. How could you think it would be safe for him there?" Jiraiya tried to explain when Ma stopped yelling, but Pa yelled next. "No, Ma. These fools can possibly have a good reason." Pa threw Minato back, making him fall from his chair. Pa hopped back over to his wife, and he felt his heart breaking as he looked at his crying wife as she held the shirt tight in her hands. "Come on, Ma. We're going to Konoha and we'll collect what we can from the Hokage. We'll put his spirit to rest on empty Mayaboku so no human can ever bother him again." "What?" Pa and Ma glared at them, and then Pa spoke. "Mena and Mito will also not be allowed to sign our contract, and we'll speak to the slugs and make sure that they will not be allowed to sign theirs as well." Minato stood up and spoke as Tsunade tried to comfort the sobbing Kushina. "But you can't do that. You're one of Konoha's strongest summons, and you can't keep our son's memory away from us." Ma glared at Minato, and Pa stomped his foot on the table. "We can, and you and my now failure of student are forbidden to summon us or use sage mode unless it is in the most dire situations." With that said, the two toads left to find a way to put the spirit of a boy they never knew to rest. They left the shell-shocked humans to come to terms with the fact they had lost a son they never got to know due to their own actions, and that the prophecy that had started all this was now gone. Hell. Third POV. A massive wave of power erupted from the forest before her and traveled through 9 rings of hell. All the ancient demons in hell shivered as a power missing from hell suddenly reappeared. But, the most shocked was Lucifer as he jumped up from his throne, eyes wide as he felt his old friend's energy. Lilith, his queen, smiled as he knew one of her husband's friends must have finally returned. Goetia family estate. Octavia, a 9-year-old owl girl and one of the heirs of the Goetia family, ran through her family's private forest to find a hiding place. Octavia left the house after hearing her parents fighting. As she ran, she was thrown back by the massive wave of power that erupted from the forest in front of her. Octavia, being the child she was, started walking toward the forest center, wanting to know what was happening. When she reached the forest center, she saw a young boy laying in a hole. As she walked closer, she saw he looked like a fox with a torn-up pair of black breaths with 2 large pockets on both thighs. But he had 9 BLD red tails with orange tails tips and black lines going down them. But he seemed to have a more human body. He had human-looking legs, but his arms were a mix of human and fox front legs. He had hands, but his fingers ended in what looked like razor-sharp claws. The skin of his face, and she blushed. Naruto's whisker marks had grown out to become larger, with scratches marks at the edges. Around his eyes were black marks. The marks traveled up to his new ears on the top of his head. On his back were 6 spiral circles on his back, all connected by black lines. Think Naruto's Baryon mode for the face. Octavia touched his face with her hand. Not sure what to do, Octavia sat down and rested his head on her thigh. Octavia didn't know why, but she started to run her hand through Naruto's hair and felt his ears as she stroked his hair. Octavia. She looked behind her as her father burst through the trees. Octavia rested her hand on Naruto's head, but she froze along with her father as a black portal opened above the forest. They looked up as Lucifer himself fell through the portal. He crashed down in front of them and looked down at Naruto. I see, so my old friend passed on his power and some of his soul as well. Kurama, the first Duke and true Duke of the Wrath. Lucifer looked at the young girl. He saw her holding the boy with such a soft hand, a hand Kurama was never shown or felt. Then he looks at the boy more closely. Newer and older scars could be seen once you looked close enough. Lucifer frowned as he looked at the air his friend sent. No, I will not let history repeat again. Lucifer then looked up at Stolas and spoke in a slow, calm tone. Stolas, this young demon is the heir to the title Duke and the Dukeship of Wrath. I leave him to your care for now. I'll be sending one-of-a-kind materials from the human world for him to learn from. Stolas got on one knee and bowed his head. Yes, my king. Lucifer turned and opened another portal. He looked back at Naruto out of the corner of his eye. That child, he's going to become very powerful. And those marks on his back. If those are what I think they are. He may even become more powerful than the sins and reach closer to me than Kurama ever did. Konoha, 2 days before the return of the 4th Hokage and family Konoha, one of the 5 great nations, was in deep depression and anger. They had all been told the truth by a rage-filled 3rd Hokage. The boy that was killed was the son of the 4th Hokage and the only thing that was holding the soul of the 9 Tails in check. He told them that the boy they had beaten, starved, abused, neglected, and shamed was the son of the great hero of the Leaf. He'd also told them of how the 4th himself and his wife abandoned his son for his other 2 children. The civilians of the village were crushed at how they treated the true hero of the village. The ninja clans had felt unbelievable shame as they realized what they'd left Naruto to. Many had thought he could be Minato's and Kushina's son but had no proof. Now all the ninja heads were standing in front of the Hokages, having followed the order to come to the Hokage's office. Now, they stood before him as he took a puff of his pipe. He pulled the pipe away and breathed out the smoke as he looked at them all. So you all know, the 4th, his wife, children, and my last 2 students are coming back to the village. From what I understand from the elder toads. They came to take what was left of Naruto's things to put his spirit to rest where no human will disturb his spirit. The heads looked down in shame. So that's why he hasn't had a tombstone placed in the graveyard. Hiruzen looked at Tsum as she spoke. What do you mean? Tsum cleared her throat and spoke up. My pup Kiba and he may not have been good friends, but they were classmates and as a mother. I told him we should go and lay flowers at his grave. Many of us did, but we couldn't find one. Hiruzen looked at Shikaku Nara as he stood up and spoke his mind. Let's not forget what we all did. We all looked at the boy as if he wasn't there. And now, we have a family that we have no idea what they are capable of on the way here. And we all know that they know Naruto is dead. We need to have a plan to deal with them once they show up. Everyone hated to admit he was right, but unknown to them all, a new prophecy was given to all the great elders of all the summons, one of destruction. Heard POV Konoha the return. The Namikaze family and Sanmin walked up to the gates of Konoha, all with different thoughts running through their minds. But all of them came to the same conclusion. They'd never have the same life they once had. The adults were no fools. They knew the news of who Naruto's parents would be and knew they'd be seen as the bad guys. As they walked up to the check-in station, Minato smiled as his last student walked out of the gate. When the two looked at one another, Minato rushed over, knowing his student would at least be happy to see him. But before Minato could touch his student, a Kakashi's fist slammed into the side of Minato's face. Minato was sent flying with the punch's strength and crashed back into the gate. "Don't touch me, you bstrd." Minato sat up as his family rushed over. "Why, Kakashi?" Kakashi narrowed his eye at them. "You left that poor boy to die knowing we couldn't always be there. So you all know, the village had decided you all will not be allowed to rejoin the village as full citizens. For the rest, you'll have to see the Hokage for punishment for what only he and the Fire Lord know the full list of charges." They all stood there stunned as Kakashi jumped off to start his mission. The Namikaze family kids weren't sure what was happening but knew something was wrong. Dread filled them as Minato got to his feet, and they walked into the village to the hateful glares and yells for them to leave and not come back. They were not willing to face the third Hokage right now and had the new prophecy in their minds. The words echoed in Minato's head was like an evil voice that never left him alone. The hero-to-be has fallen, now a villain of unmatched power will rise. If he lives the world of shinobi will end, should he die then human world will burn by his heirs. Goichia family dining room. Naruto now 10 swings 6 of his 9 tails around with Octavia, trying to grab them all. She had 3 in her arms, and Stolas laughed as he ate a mouse. His wife Stella, a normally angry woman, was calm and smiling as he was the heir to a dukeship. This was the kind of friend she wanted her daughter to have, and who knew, maybe she could get them together later. Her daughter could be the first Goichia duchess in the family's history. She was happy to see her husband had finally lived up to expectations for once. But, she felt her anger from humans growing after Naruto had told her and Stola what his life was like. They may have been demons, but even they wouldn't have treated kids like that. Stolas and Stella both jumped from the yell. They looked over and saw Octavia pulling on 3 of Naruto's tails. "Let me have the other tails, they're so soft." Octavia let his tails go right now. Stella got up, reached over the table, and grabbed Octavia's arms. "Octavia, you can't just pull on someone's tails." Octavia pitched a fit but did as her mother told her. Naruto grabbed the tails Octavia had yanked on. But, when he saw her sad face, he frowned, not liking seeing a girl that had been nice to him sad. Naruto moved his tails and wrapped them around her shoulders. Octavia blushed and smiled before she grabbed onto his tails. Naruto smiled, glad to see her smiling. Hell, third POV Year 1. A 10-year-old Naruto was asleep with his hair and tails splayed over the bed. Laying down beside her head on his arm and holding one of his tails was Octavia. Much to her father's annoyance, she would sneak into Naruto's room at night. Naruto was a heavy sleeper, so he only noticed her once he woke up. Groaning, Naruto opened his new red fox eyes and looked at the weight on his arm. He smiled as he saw Octavia asleep on his arm and holding one of his tails. Naruto looked down and saw she'd grabbed one of his shirts again and laughed a little before she slipped out of her hold. Octavia groaned a little before Naruto used a tail to pull the cover up to keep the warmth from leaving her too soon. He then pulled a pillow down, and Octavia sighed as she grabbed onto the pillow. Naruto laughed again before fixing his shirt and sleep breathes. Best to go and see the servants to find out what's for breakfast. Naruto walked over to his door and opened to see Stolas about to knock on the door. Putting a finger to his lips, Stolas nodded before he stepped out of the way and let Naruto step out of his room. Naruto closed the door softly before he looked up at Stolas. "She's in my shirt this time. I guess we know where the 4 shirts walked off to." Stolas sighed as the two started to walk down the hall. Naruto slipped his hands into his pockets, and Stolas tightened his rope knot. "So, how are your eyes adjusting? Having unlocked your demon power may be a little stressful at first. So are you alright, my boy?" Naruto nodded as he yawned. "Yeah, it really was a pain right after. But, as long as I put only a little energy into them, it's not much trouble. But I wish Octavia would stop sneaking into my bed. I mean, it's nice to know someone wants to be close to me, but I hate waking up to numb arms." Stolas laughed as they walked into the kitchen. The imp servants quickly walked over a plate of hellhog bacon with toast and scrambled eggs with orange juice. In front of Stolas, they set down the same meal with a newspaper and a side of oatmeal. She sat beside Stolas and took a sip as they set a plate with oatmeal, toast on the side, and cooked hellhog ham. Stella looked at Naruto as he ate the last piece of bacon. "Is Octavia still asleep in your bed?" Naruto gave her a simple nod as he drank his orange juice. Stella laughed, something that Stolas was still getting used to again. Since Naruto had come into their home, life had become so much better for everyone in the home or working for them home. Over the last year, life around the house was getting much easier, and even the servants were happier. Naruto's mere presence seemed to calm everyone. Stella herself was even easier on her daughter and her husband, much to their joy. Naruto laughed as Octavia walked into the kitchen wearing his shirt and pulling up a pair of black shorts. Naruto blushed, then he saw a pair of purple panties. Stola cleared his throat. Naruto jumped before quickly finishing his plate as Octavia sat down. Naruto tried to get away, but Octavia grabbed his shirt as he tried to get away. She jerked him back down, and Stella laughed as she looked at the two. "Oh, future son-in-law." Naruto paled as Stolas glared at him. Stella laughed before she spoke again. "Okay, I had my fun. You two remember we're having guests over for a dinner party tonight. Octavia, I expect you to be in that dress we picked out last week, and Naruto, please put on the suit we had made for you. I know you hate having the belt near your tails, but please, it's just one night, and fix your hair." Naruto nodded, but Octavia sighed as she wrapped her arm around Naruto's arm and leaned into Naruto's shoulder as she chewed on the bacon. Naruto looked out the window and couldn't help but wonder how his Gigi was doing. "Naruto, my boy." Naruto looked over at Stolas as he set his paper down. Stolas interlocked his fingers as he looked down at Naruto. "Stella and I will be speaking with the rest of the Goetia. We expect you to act as proper young heirs to two great houses. Naruto, you are a new heir of what was considered an extinct house. Many eyes will be on you now that the word of you is making rounds. Keep your guard up. Some will be looking to try and get you into their house influence." Naruto nodded and noticed Octavia loosened her grip. Taking advantage, Naruto got away from her and bolted out of the kitchen. Octavia cursed as she watched her friend rush off. Later that night, Naruto growled as he adjusted his suit jacket and dark red dress vest. Naruto closed his jacket and sighed as he let his tails hang low. Naruto sighed as he looked at himself in the mirror. Naruto saw himself in a fine black suit and dress shoes, a dark red vest, and a white undershirt under the jacket. Naruto looked up and saw his brushed back hair tied to his back with a red ribbon Octavia had picked out for him. It gave him a small ponytail that was touching his jacket collar. "Naruto, are you finished?" Naruto looked at the door and called out. "Yeah, I just finished, Octavia." Octavia opened the door and walked in. Naruto blushed as he looked at Octavia as she smiled at him. She was in a fawn floor-length purple dress. Her shoulders and arms were covered in something that looked like fishnet stockings. Her hair feathers were pulled back, and she had a crown on. Octavia laughed into the hand as she looked at Naruto. "I guess you like the dress." Naruto nodded before he cleared his throat and walked over to her, his shoes making a soft click on the hardwood floor. He stood in front of Octavia, a bent arm out. "Your servant." Octavia laughed but took his arm all the same. They walked back out of his and down the hall. They could hear the chatter as they got close to the ballroom. Once they walked in, the noise in the room stopped once they walked in. The nobles around him looked at him like a piece of fresh-cut meat. As they walked to Stolas' side, Octavia held tight to Naruto's arm. As Stolas started to thank everyone for coming, a group of the older women of the family talked in the back. "So that's the Wrath Duke to be. DMN, of course, Stella's already made some moves. You know we would do the same. Can't you feel the aura coming off that kid? He's already as strong as someone 7 or 8 years older than him." The oldest woman, a much older owl, spoke up as Octavia dragged Naruto to the snack table. He already has all 9 tails. All the women looked at her as she spoke. Is that important? She nodded before she spoke up. Yes, I looked into the old history of hell, and I believe he's a kitsune demon. An incredible breed of demon with only a few in our history. But, for him to have 9 like the last duke means his power will increase rapidly as he grows older. How strong was the last duke? She narrowed her eyes as Naruto steadied Octavia with one of his tails. They danced around one another on the dance floor. He was able to wound the king of hell even if he lost the fight. That stunned the chattering birds and the surrounding noble. None of them had known that kid could grow to be that strong. They all looked at Naruto as he and Octavia laughed and danced around. But, many of the nobles froze as they saw 2 of the older heirs of a branch Goetia family. Move brats. They kicked Octavia's legs, but Naruto kept Octavia on her feet as he glared at the older heirs. They were both male white cockatoos, each in a blue and black suit. They smirked down at Naruto, and he growled before. To their shock, power erupted from Naruto, setting everyone on edge. His whisker and eye marker turned red, and his canines grew out into fangs. The tails not holding Octavia up ignited and burned a bright blue. His blonde hair turned BLD red with his glowing red eyes. You dare to touch Octavia? Naruto slammed 2 flaming tails into their face and sent them flying. One slammed into the wall across the ballroom stuck in the wall, and the other slammed into the room's roof. He fell back down onto the floor. Both of them were out cold and bleeding, but everyone in the room was frozen to their spot on the floor. Naruto sighed and relaxed after a minute. The power in the air faded, and his tails, marks, and hair all returned to normal. But he still glared at the 2 as a female white cockatoo rushed over as another large white cockatoo male in a blue suit rushed over to the one on the floor. That was so cool, Naruto. Octavia jumped into Naruto's side and laughed as she rubbed her cheek into Naruto's. Naruto blushed and laughed as he rubbed the back of his head. Stella smiled as she looked at the 2 of them. Oh, these 2 will help me take over the main branch sooner than planned. Stolas looked at the boy, shocked that he'd just stuck the 2 sons of his eldest brother and completely knocked them out. Oh, this is going to be a long party. And it was. Other heirs and heiress had tried to mess with Octavia. Still, Naruto was never far away, or Octavia just had to say his name, and he scared them off. But, this also made many of the nobles with daughters plan to try and steal him away from Stolas and Stella. At the night's end, Naruto and Octavia ran off as a few of the younger heiresses tried to separate Naruto from Octavia. After the party, Naruto sent Octavia off with her mother while he stayed to talk with Stolas. Stolas grabbed Naruto's shoulder and made him look him in the eye. Young man, do you know what you've done? Stolas didn't yell, but his firm tone made it clear he was upset. Naruto sighed as he looked away. Naruto, I'm not mad that you defended our owlet. In fact, I'm grateful for your actions. But do not resort to violence like that again. You've put yourself in the sights of some very dangerous demons, my boy. Naruto nodded, and Stolas waved his hand, a sign Naruto knew meant he was free. Naruto rushed out of the ballroom, pulled the DMN jacket off, and opened the red vest. Year 2 Hell 3rd POV Naruto, now 11, sighed as he sat on the roof, looking at the morning clouds. Not too long after, Naruto thrashed 2 of the heirs after they tried to make Octavia fall. Stella got off on the fact her future son-in-law had made it clear who had the strongest house in the family. Stella had sent Octavia off for a week to visit a few cousins she wanted her to connect with to ensure they had a better power block. She was so grateful for Naruto's wrath that night. Now she was sitting with the wives of her strongest supporters in the garden, ensuring her alliances. Naruto had given her a leg up she was looking for and was going to use it well. This heavy book. Naruto moved close to the edge once he heard a voice. He saw an imp with a large set of horns on the MSTR room's balcony. He tried to stand, and Naruto saw he'd fallen into Stella's meeting. Not wanting to hear the yelling, Naruto grabbed the imp and book with his tails as he started to fall. Naruto set the imp down on the roof, and the imp looked at him. I don't want to hear Stella yelling or see you ripped limb from limb. Go to the other side of the house, nobody is over there today. And before you ask, what Stolas does and losses has nothing to do with me. The imp smiled as he looked at Naruto. Working for me, thanks, kid. If you ever need someone killed, look me up. Name's Blitz. The O is silent. Naruto hummed, then nodded as he stood up. Naruto knew he couldn't get down alone but noticed something about this imp. The air around him felt different. Come on, let me get you down and get lost before anyone knows what is going on. Blitz smiled as they walked over to the other side of the house, and Naruto used two of his tails to set Blitz down on the ground. As Naruto pulled the tails back, Blitz gave him one more wave before she slipped through the large shrubs. I got the feeling I'll be seeing him again. Naruto sighed before deciding he wanted out of this DMN estate for a day. He was bored and wanted a taste of freedom again. Naruto walked back across the roof and looked down at Stella as she laughed with her friends. His shadow was cast over the table, and they all looked up at him. The other wives were shocked as Naruto looked down at them with glowing red eyes. Stella smiled as she looked up at him and rested her chin on her hands, happy to see the king of the board. How can I help you, future son-in-law? Naruto narrowed his eyes as he looked at Stella, and she blinked, surprised at the look. Naruto. Naruto smiled before jumping and landing on the ground before them all. Naruto fixed his burnt orange vest and rolled up the sleeves as he locked eyes with Stella. Stella wasn't used to this Naruto. The Naruto she knew was relaxed and calm, but this version gave off more of a presence than normal. And she'd be lying if she said she didn't like this Naruto more. I'm leaving the estate for a little while. I've been locked in this place for more than 2 years. Then there are the times I'm left alone for days when you send Octavia off to other branches. I'm off to pick out some weapons and do some shopping. I don't want to dirty my hands, or tails when I have to start killing fools. Stella looked at him, shocked, but then she smiled wider as she looked at him. Well, you do have a point. You've done everything we've asked and much more, so I guess some rewards are due. I'll have a driver get the car. Stella then looked back at her friends. You heard the Duke-to-be girls, he's going to go get some weapons. Stella stood up and then walked into the house. Naruto looked at the others, and they all nervously laughed as they looked at him. Naruto's look put them on edge. He laughed a second later, then bowed to them before he turned around. 30 minutes later Naruto watched the building and demon as they rode down the road. Naruto sighed as they came to a stop at a red light. Naruto looked at the demons walking around. Stella watched Naruto closely. She tried to keep Naruto close to those who'd be his equal or, much to her annoyance, a level under him like her family. She liked the boy, she really did, but she wanted him to stay around them. The car started to move again, and Stella, wanting to know what he was thinking, spoke up. So, what kind of weapons are you looking for? Naruto looked at her and nodded as he spoke. I was thinking of a sword and maybe 2 handguns to get some range when I need it. Best to know how to fight at range and up close. Stella nodded, seeing the logic of Naruto's plan. Soon they pulled up to the best weapons store in the Pride Ring. They parked, and Stella told the driver to get some food as they were shopping and would call him before checking out. He thanked her as she and Naruto walked into the store. They were greeted with bows and a few "Your Highnesses." Naruto waved and thanked them. Stella smiled as they walked up to the wall of handguns. Naruto looked over the guns, and 2 caught his eyes. They looked like a set of twin 4.5 Colt revolvers. They looked like they were made from black metal of some kind and had glowing white engravings. In the center of the revolvers, the grip looked like it had a gem with 6 wings and a halo. Naruto grabbed the 2 guns and spun them on his trigger fingers. He grabbed the handles and smiled as he looked at them. I guess we have the guns now for the sword. Naruto nodded as a sales imp gave him an adjustable gun belt with 2 holsters and had a strap on the right front in front of the holster. Naruto holstered the guns, and Stella told the imp to have a crate of ammo ready at the register when they were ready for checkout. They then walked across the store and soon got to the blade section. Stella started looking for a weapon for Octavia since she needed to learn self-defense too. Naruto smiled when he saw a katana with a black blade and red spine. The sheath underneath it with a white sheath and a line of BLD red pentagram going down to the bottom. Naruto used 2 of his tails and grabbed the sword in sheath. Naruto sheathed the sword and put the sword on his belt. A Eastern sword, that's a odd choice. Naruto looked at Stella as she walked back over with a short sword. Naruto nodded as he turned and was about to walk away, but Stella grabbed his shoulder. He looked back, and she held out a hellphone. I got one for Octavia, one too. You two are about old enough, we should let you two have some independence. Naruto smiled and took the phone, and slipped it into his pocket. Well, I guess we should get going. Stella nodded as they walked to the checkout. Hell, third year Naruto, now 12, groaned as his eyes opened and looked up at his roof. At the bottom of his vision was a head of a black feather resting on his chest, and he could feel fingers on his left shoulder with a leg wrapped around his right leg. Naruto sighed, knowing he wasn't going anywhere with her holding him. Looking over at his dresser were his phone and weapons. Octavia groaned as she moved around a little, and her head moved up his chest. Naruto gave out a small laugh, then wrapped his right arm around her shoulder and held her closer. Naruto closed his eyes, wanting to get some more sleep if he was stuck. Naruto lay there for about another 20 minutes before a few hard knocks came on his door. Naruto opened his eyes and looked at the door as Octavia groaned and held on to Naruto tighter and pushed her head into Naruto's chest. A few harder knocks came from the door before Stella's voice came through the door. Stolas, leave them be. The teachers have been hammering them with work and Naruto trained late into the night. Octavia groaned as she opened her eyes. DMN it, what time is it? Naruto laughed more as he sat up. Octavia held on and groaned as she let go of Naruto. They got out of bed, and Naruto stretched his arms and back. Naruto looked back over and blushed as Octavia leaned over, showing off her bright red panties. She was digging through the dresser drawer she'd taken over. He also couldn't help but notice that her hips, but Naruto pulls out a pair of tight black shorts. Naruto saw they fit her like a glove and showed off her butt nicely. Like her mother, Octavia looked back at Naruto and noticed him looking at her butt. She smiled and shook her butt a little. See something you like? Naruto's face turned red, and he looked away. Octavia laughed, walked over, kissed Naruto's cheek, and ran a hand over his chest as she walked away. I'll be waiting in the kitchen. Naruto watched her walk over to the door and opened the door, then looked back at him one more time before she left. Don't forget we're going to the Harvest Moon thing with my dad. Naruto nodded as she walked out of the room. Naruto gulped as he patted down his shirt and retied the knot of sleeping briefs, making it come more off his tails. Naruto quickly grabbed his phone and followed her out. He rushed down the hall and slowed as he approached the kitchen and heard Stolas talking. Octavia, how many times must I tell you to stop sneaking into that boy's room? What's the big deal? Naruto's never touched me in any perverse ways, Dad. The most that has happened was an accidental touch, but those are meaningless. He's asleep, or it's when we're training with our swords or when he's teaching me to shoot. And I can deal with it as I know what kind of young man he is. But you two are starting to develop some, and I don't want you sleeping in his bed anymore. I've seen how you look at him, Octavia. I don't want to have you and him to be teen parents. Deciding to end this, Naruto yawned as he walked through the door, acting like he hadn't heard them. He walked over, stretching his tails out, before he sat down next to Stella as she sipped her coffee. An imp put a plate of food and a cup of juice in front of him. Naruto nodded to the imp as he took a step back. Thanks. You're welcome, young sir. Naruto started to eat as Stella spoke up. So, Naruto, can we count on you to keep our Octavia safe? Naruto laughed and nodded as he ate his toast. Octavia smiled as she walked away from her father and sat beside Naruto. Stolas sighed as he walked over, and sat in his seat, and then looked at Naruto. Naruto, before we go, you and I will be going out to get you some things for the Wrath Ring. It will be the ring you'll be watching over once you've grown and married. Also, bring your weapons. The place we are going is safe, but best to get used to always having them on you. Naruto nodded as he finished his breakfast. Octavia let him go, and Stolas followed him out to the hall. As soon as they got away, Naruto spoke before Stolas could. We have to go see that imp to get the book right. Naruto smirked when he saw the shocked look on Stolas's face. I've kept your secret and helped him get away last year when he almost crashed one of Stella's tea parties. I let it go that day because Octavia would have had to suffer if you'll start fighting again, so I've held my tongue. Stolas's eyes widened as he looked down at Naruto. He had no idea Naruto had thought of the family like that. I've looked into the Wrath Ring, knowing I'd have to take care of it one day. Naruto smirked as he walked into his room. Half an hour later, Naruto's eye twitched as he watched Blitz and Stolas talking about business investment. Blitzo. I'm hungry. Naruto hummed as he looked at the door before it kicked in. Naruto saw a gray and white hellhound. She wore black leg stockings, blue shorts, and a black shirt with red fangs on her budding chest and butt. But what caught Naruto's attention the most was her eyes. They were red with white iris that had slits. She locked eyes with Naruto and felt her heart race as she looked at him. Loona, I'm busy at the moment. Loona ignored Blitz as she looked at Naruto. Loona's instances screamed at her to get this alpha to be. Loona slowly walked over to Naruto and ignored Blitz's as Naruto held eye contact with her. Her tail wagged, and Blitz looked on in horror. No. Blitz grabbed Loona and pulled her away from Naruto. Naruto laughed, then threw a tail out and smacked Blitz's face. Loona kicked him in the nuts and smiled as she looked at Naruto. Thanks, want to hang out with me? Loona asked, a blush on her face. Sure, we still have a few hours until we head off to the Harvest Moon thing. Is that dinner down the street any good? Loona nodded as Naruto stood up, and they left the office. Naruto was happy about the new friend. They soon exited the building, and Loona grabbed Naruto's hand and started pulling him down the street. Naruto, without thinking about it, followed her. Naruto smiled as he was pulled into the dinner. They spent the better part of an hour talking and eating. By the end, Loona was sure she had found the alpha she wanted, like she used to hear the older hounds talk about. Naruto was so kind to her and listened when she talked. When they returned to the office, Loona held onto Naruto's arm and rested her head on his shoulder. She's also wrapped her tail around two of Naruto's fox tails. Naruto laughed as he rubbed the back of his head as Stolas and Blitz looked at them. Stolas had a worried look on his face, and Blitz looked ready to murder him. Naruto smiled as he looked at the imp. Hey Loona, you got a phone? Loona smiled and nodded as she pulled out another hell phone. Naruto told her his number, and she texted him so he had her number. Naruto thanked her, and he and Stolas left, much to Loona's sadness. Soon they were home, and Octavia dragged Naruto off as soon as she saw him. She wanted to show Naruto the dress she was going to wear. She had him sit in her room as she walked into her bathroom. After a few minutes, Octavia walked out in a burnt orange ankle-length dress with head feathers pulled up into a bun with a few hanging over her face. On her neck was a dark blue lace tied around her neck. One Naruto blinked as he looked at her. Are you trying to match my favorite vest? Octavia blushed as she looked away from Naruto. Maybe I just wanted to wear something you'd like. Naruto blushed and laughed as he stood up. Well, I need to go and get dressed, so I'll meet you in the car. Octavia nodded and walked back into her bathroom. She was going to put on a little makeup to make her eyes stand out a little more. 2 hours later Naruto was practicing his draw as the imps got ready for the pain games to start. At his side of the bar stood Octavia, happy talking with an older female imp named Millie. Naruto spun his guns one last time before slamming them back into the holsters. The announcer called out the start of the games, and Millie gave a quick goodbye before she rushed off. Naruto laughed and rested his forearm on his sword. "So what do you think of the Wrath Ring?" Naruto shrugged as Octavia grabbed onto his free arm, as they started to walk to the stage to sit with Stolas. Stolas had a couch brought out, and they all sat in the shade. Naruto sighed, annoyed that all he could do was watch. Little did Naruto know this year brought him the two loves of his life. Hell Year 4, Loona down. Naruto shot an imp, and Octavia pressed her back to Naruto's as she fired her rifle. On you left. Listening to Loona, Naruto turned and shot another imp. Loona rushed over, and they started to run through the street. You just to open you mouth Octavia. Naruto shot 2 more imps and a hellhound. Well, I'm sorry. They shouldn't have told us that they'd made a coat out of your tails. Loona cut in as she killed a larger imp with one of her twin katanas Naruto bought her as a birthday gift. Yeah. We're the only ones who get to do anything with those tails. Naruto growled as they rushed into the building with the ANBU office, luckily losing the last of the gang after them. They sighed as they got into the elevator. DMN it. Naruto was running low on ammo. He reloaded what he had as Octavia pulled another ammo magazine from her ammo belt. She loaded a fresh magazine, and Loona cleaned her blades as the door dinged. They sighed together as they walked out of the elevator. Naruto walked up to the door as Loona started to talk to her rival as she sheathed her swords. Hey, Octavia, why did your family have us start doing these small contracts? I know I shouldn't complain about the easy pay, but why? Well, for one, he wanted me and Naruto to get used to fighting. Since we're both from noble families, we must serve at least 4 times in the yearly Extermination Day battle. And 2, unlike most demons like you, who get to hide from the fighting. If our house kills some real angels, then our houses keep the weapons and are paid for the rank of the angels we kill. Octavia huffed as they walked into the office to see Naruto and Blitz talking. Okay, so you guys killed the leader. Stolas was paying 3 grand for this one, and after I take the company's share you'll each come out of this 750 each. I'll have the cash ready before you kids run off to lunch. Blitz stood up from the front desk and walked into his office. Naruto sighed as he rubbed the back of his head and looked back at the girls. Octavia and Loona were glaring at one another out of the corner of their eyes, and Naruto could swear he saw sparks. Coughed, getting their attention. They looked at him, and he smiled as he pulled out his phone. Who wants pizza? They smiled as they nodded, and Naruto made a quick call. Once the food was ordered, Naruto unlocked his gun belt, hung it up, and sat on the office couch. They quickly sat down on each of his sides. Octavia grabbed onto his right arm and rested her head on his shoulder. Loona wrapped her tail around 2 of Naruto's and interlocked her fingers. Octavia saw this and glared at their hands. Octavia did the same but held tight to Naruto's hand. It's not like I hate the attention, but I wish they'd give me some DMN room to breath. Naruto's eye twitched as he waited for the pizza to get here so he could get free. Hell 3rd POV Year 5 Naruto, now 14, jumped back, dodging an artificial angel spear. He used his sword to cut off the head of the artificial. Naruto jumped up, pulled out his gun, and shot one in the face. Naruto huffed as he looked around, seeing that he'd killed more than a dozen artificial angels, 2 normal angels, and 1 high angel of the First Order. He'd been abandoned by the other heirs of the other branch families of the Goetia. He knew Octavia would be safe with the rest of the long-range combat units. Stolas' house had become the most important and a front-runner, so Octavia would be well guarded as they fought. Naruto turned and fired at another high angel. Naruto hit the woman's wing, and she slammed face-first into a wall. Naruto put another round in the back of her head, killing the angel. Naruto noticed this one seemed different from the other high angel. Unlike most other angels, she had bright red hair. On the ground beside the angel, she dropped a holy katana with a pure white blade with a golden and white handle. On her side was a sheath, and Naruto smiled when he heard the alarm. Finally. Naruto yelled as he fell back into a wall as the angel started falling back. He had a cut from a spear on his leg. It was a long cut going down his thigh. Sighing, Naruto forced himself up. He knew those heirs would return to take the spoils he'd fought for. Naruto holstered his gun, sheathed his sword as he walked over, and used 5 tails to take the holy katana and the sheath. Naruto slipped the sword under his belt, then walked over to the other high angel and used 2 tails to pick up the holy double-bladed battle axe. The handle was pure white with a gold-wrapped center and lower grip. The blade body was white with golden edges. With a smirk, Naruto rested the battle axe on his shoulder. The normal angel was using the same spears as the artificials. Naruto! Naruto! Naruto turned as Octavia ran around a corner and laughed a little as he looked at the purple uniform Stella forced her to use. Her top feathers have been tied back with 3 feathers hanging over her face. Naruto hissed as his leg finally healed from the DMN holy weapon. Octavia ran up to Naruto after seeing him. She hugged him, and Naruto laughed before Octavia pulled back and looked around. "Where are the Goetia heirs Dad put under your command?" Naruto huffed as he looked at her. "The second that saw the first high angel, they abandoned me to deal with it and the artificials. It was close right after they ran." Naruto touched his leg, and Octavia looked down at the slowly vanishing scar. If that artificial was just a little faster it could have taken it. Octavia fumed as she looked at the wound. Octavia knew the news would have covered the battle, so she'd get the faces of the heirs. Naruto huffed before he looked down at the angel, knowing what he had to do to get his money. "I hate this part." Naruto lifted the battle axe, and Octavia looked away. With one quick swing, Naruto took the head off the angel, grabbed his hair, and then walked back over to the woman. Naruto used a tail to turn her over and looked at her face. She had a round face with a small scar down her left cheek. "Forgive me." Naruto cut off her head and grabbed her hair. Naruto turned his head and saw Octavia had gathered the spears up, and he smiled. He walked over and hugged her, and without hesitation, she wrapped her arms around him. "Thanks, Octavia." Octavia blushed and rubbed her face into his neck. Naruto was taller than her now, and Octavia had grown a little taller and had started growing into her curves. Naruto smiled as he ran a hand down her back. With a sigh, Naruto spoke up. "Just 2 more and we'll be done with this nightmare, Octavia. Who knows what the future holds for us once this is all done." Octavia smiled as an image of a wedding and eggs flashed in her mind. But then, an image of Loona taking Naruto flashed in her mind. Octavia held Naruto a little tighter, not willing to let him go. Octavia knew she loved Naruto but didn't know if he loved her the same way. "He's alive." Naruto growled as he held Octavia to his chest, knowing she wanted to attack the heirs as they returned. Naruto glared at the 6 birds. "I'll deal with you 6 later. I have a meeting to get to and money to collect." The heirs looked sad, and Naruto saw all they had were a few spears each. Naruto knew he'd called it right that they'd come to collect the reward for his hard work. Octavia turned in Naruto's hold as she tried to pull her rifle off her back. "Relax, Octavia, I'll deal with them later. We all have to go to the palace to collect it later tonight, so I'll have my payback there. Now come on, Loona is waiting for us, then we'll go to the meeting tonight." Octavia's right eye twitched, not happy with that news but knew she couldn't just tell him no. Octavia knew Naruto cared for Loona a lot. But she hoped it wasn't as much as he cared for her. Naruto grabbed the heads and spears with his tails. Naruto wouldn't leave these fools with anything of value. While holding onto Octavia's side, Naruto started to walk away. Octavia let it go, knowing that when word got out that they ran from battle, a lot of damage would be done to their houses. The heirs would lose a lot of face in the wider view. 20 minutes later, Naruto smiled as he watched Loona and Octavia scream at Blitz after taking a shot at Naruto. With a laugh, Naruto got onto his feet and walked over to the door to the meeting room. Naruto closed the door and pulled out his phone. Naruto opened his contacts, hit Stella's name, and then put the phone to his ear. It rang a few times before she picked up. Naruto. This is unusual. You hardly ever call me. Naruto could hear some water and guessed she was in the bath. The lower house asshole Stolas set me up with, ditched me while I was fighting a high angel, then came back to steal my spoils. But let me get to the point. I will call them out when we go to get our rewards. Half of them are some of the ones trying to take control. I'm going to skin those for thinking they could do such things. I will stomp these little sheets back into the dirt like the insects they are. Stella made a strange cooing sound, and Naruto heard some splashing around. Down on two of her fingers. After a second, she spoke with a spark she hadn't felt in years and started returning to her body. Naruto, I'll deal with the parents. Kill those little heirs and turn them in new rugs for the house. Naruto laughed and smiled as he made a plan. Before he hung up, he swore he heard a mmm before the call ended. Ignoring what she may have been doing, Naruto put his phone away. Naruto sighed as he walked back into the office and saw Loona and Octavia holding each other's collars. Naruto laughed, knowing his life would always be crazy. Naruto broke them up, and they glared at one another. Soon the pizza arrived, and they all started to eat. Hours later, Naruto stood beside Octavia and smiled as he watched Lucifer as he was about to give his little speech. Octavia leaned into Naruto, and he laughed as he wrapped his arm around her side. Lucifer walked up to the balcony that overlooked the hall. On his right side was his wife Lilith, and she was appealing. She was tall and had long golden hair. Her horn was larger and had curved back horns. Naruto saw she had a body that could put anyone to shame. From what Naruto could tell. On Lucifer's other side was their daughter. Charlie Morningstar, and Naruto blushed when she looked down, and they looked at each other. Charlie blushed, too, and Naruto started to really look at her. She was a little shorter than Naruto's current 5'9", she had a somewhat slender demoness. She was standing around 5 feet tall or over. She has long, blonde hair with lighter blonde and pink highlights, tied into a twice-banded low ponytail. Her blonde bangs flip to her left with a curl. Her lips are black, and she has rosy red cheeks. She wears gray eyeliners, her eyes are red, her mascara is light yellow, and she has thick black eyelashes, both top and bottom. She was in a dark red, almost crimson dress showing off her already growing curves. It was clear she would be a real beauty, like her mother. Naruto also noticed her giving him a once-over as well. Interesting woman. Charlie looked at Naruto and smiled at what she saw. Naruto had spiky blonde hair tied back into a ponytail with crimson highlights at the edges. His bangs were a brighter red with a mix of orange and sharp piercing red eyes. He had on a white long-sleeve dress shirt with a burnt orange vest and rolled his sleeves up. On his hands were combat gloves with burnt orange knuckle guards. Naruto had on his gun belt with his weapons all at the ready for a fight. He had on blue jeans with a pair of steel-toe boots. Charlie smiled, and her black lips slightly plumped lips you'd like your girlfriend to have. But, some told Naruto this woman was dangerous but not like her parents. She had a slightly darker air behind her smile. Naruto. Naruto blinked and then realized he was holding Octavia tight to his chest. Sorry, Octavia. Naruto realized that the speech was almost over, and the guards were taking the weapons and the heads Naruto had gotten. Now, each of your rewards will be given before the end of the party. Now, before I call the party to begin, I'd like to call attention to an heir to the first house to which I granted the title of Duke 2. Naruto, please come forward. I have a spikal reward and offer for you, as you were the only heir to collect not only one high angel's head but two. Naruto let go of Octavia, but she grabbed at his hand but missed as Naruto walked forward and looked up at them. Naruto saw the smile on Charlie's face, and something didn't feel right with that smile. Good to see you again, young Kitsune. My, look at what you've grown into, my boy. You are only a year younger than my daughter and already killing first-order angels. And those eyes are your Kurama's heir for sure. Those red eyes and that aura just scream power and death. Naruto thumbed his revolver, and Lucifer smiled as he looked at the hand. Oh, you'll make a fine candidate. Naruto looked at him before Lucifer gave out a low dark laugh. I'm looking into candidates to become my daughter's future husband. That's your first reward, being the first candidate. The second is an offer to pick a weapon from my personal collection of angel weapons. Naruto stepped forward and laughed as he looked at Lucifer and spoke. While I'm grateful for two such great rewards, I'm afraid I must assign. Lucifer raised an eyebrow, and Charlie narrowed her eyes, thinking he didn't think she was worth his time. And gasps rang out around him. Lucifer hummed as he looked down at Naruto. Why is that? There was no anger in Lucifer's voice but curiousness in the boy's reasoning. Naruto smiled as he held his arms behind his back, his 9 tails swaying behind him. As you said, I'm a kitsune. A demon who loves to trick people and demons and steal what we see as vulnerable treasures. There is no fun for me if it's just handed to me, my king. Oh, and there is also a matter I'd like to bring up with you. Lucifer hummed and then nodded as he looked down at Naruto. Charlie also relaxed, realizing he wasn't thinking anything like she thought he was. I see your point. Kurama was the same way when it came to some he saw value in. He even took a chance at stealing my throne. In doing so, he was the only one to wound me in such a fight. Very well, but I will not remove you as a candidate. You're very valuable, and besides you, I can only think of 3 others that I see as worthy of my daughter. My throne requires a lot of power to hold on to it. But that aside, what would you like then? I did offer you one-of-a-kind weapon from my collection, but you've turned that down. But, all that aside, what is this matter? Naruto hummed, then pulled his arms back from around his back and crossed them over his chest. His tails swayed faster, which they did when he was deep in thought. Naruto smiled as he spoke up. First, I'd like a house of my own. Living with the Goichia family is nice, but in a year or 2 I'd like my own space. I've been making money for the last year, and I've got a lot saved to prepare for this. Second, I'd like to make it known that aside from Octavia, the other Goichia family heirs behind us fled from battle, leaving me to deal with the angels. I can't help but find this shameful and find them unworthy of their station. Naruto could feel the anger behind him and knew he'd have to deal with it once they were free from view. Lucifer hummed and nodded before he spoke up. I see. Well, I'm sure you know you're free to handle them then. Now as for the house. I've had Kurama's mansion maintained, and it's deep in the Crimson Forest just inside the mountain range of the Pride Ring. When you turn 16, I'll have a group of workers come for you. Naruto bowed and stepped back. When he was within reach, Octavia grabbed his arm and dug her smaller claws into his arm. Naruto laughed as he felt the claws break his skin. Octavia glared up at the royal family, and Naruto saw Charlie smile as she looked at them with a glint in her eye. Naruto knew that look and knew this was far from over. Like it or not, he'd gotten her attention and knew she'd keep a close eye on him. 2 hours later, Naruto smiled as he stood over the bodies as they burned with holy white flames. Naruto flashed his large canines and other teeth that were becoming fawn-like. 3 of these heirs were from far more prominent houses before Octavia's family line. Not with them gone, her house would become year 6. Naruto, Octavia, and Loona were all 15, eating in the Goichia family forest. Stella had given in rather quickly once Naruto talked to her about letting Loona train with them. Stolas and Octavia found it weird that she easily gave in to Naruto's wants. Still, Both choked it up to Naruto's presence, and actions made their house much more prominent among the remaining 40 houses. "Hey, Naruto." Naruto looked up from his sandwich. Loona set her sandwich down before she spoke up. "I was hoping I could get you to help me and my dad with something." Naruto hummed, and Octavia looked at Loona as she spoke. "What's up?" Octavia glared at Loona with a smile as she spoke. "We've got a lot of money saved up and we're going to get more weapons as well as hire some employees. Biltz and I were thinking of having some extra muscle in case someone gets stupid. I know you can bust some heads when you have to." Naruto nodded before he spoke. "I don't mind helping back if I have to bust a few skulls. I want pizza." Loona laughed and nodded as she started eating again. Naruto laughed, quickly finished his sandwich, and stood up. He sighed, not used to not having his weapon belt on. "Are we done with the training for today?" Naruto looked back at Loona, and she blushed when she locked eyes with Naruto. She never could look away once Naruto locked eyes with her. Her tail started to wag as she looked at Naruto. "Sure, all we've been doing is conditioning. Let go and get my weapons, and we'll go." Octavia sighed and spoke up when she stood up. "If that's the case, do I need to call for the car when we return?" Naruto nodded as he helped Loona to her paws. Then he pulled her into his chest. Loona blushed, and he saw Octavia's eyes glowing red as she looked at this. Naruto knew he wanted both of these girls and could have them both. The laws of hell allowed him to have both as he needed to ensure he had heirs as he was the only survivor of his house. But, he wanted to see how they would react to him becoming a little more interested in being the one who was being active instead of letting them have control. He didn't give a DMN about that F candidate's stats. "I did. Just get that new motorcycle. I hope she doesn't mind holding on to me as we ride, or she could sit in front and lean back into my chest if she rather." Not caring about Octavia's glare, Loona rubbed her head into his chest. When Naruto turned his back, Loona pulled her eyelid down and stuck her tongue out at Octavia as she glared hatefully at Loona. Loona turned and slammed her but a few times before she rushed after Naruto, a big smile on her face. Octavia's fist clenched as she watched Naruto walk away with that hellhound Beach. "You haven't won him yet, Beach." 20 minutes later Naruto backed his new custom wide rear-wheel Harley. Its body paint was a bright orange accent with a main black body. The bike had 4 exhaust pipes, 2 on each side. Naruto had a fox skull paint on the front right under the pulled-back handlebars. On the sides of the bike were his swords, and he kept his revolvers on his side. Naruto smiled as Loona hopped on in front of Naruto, to his surprise, not expecting her to really do it. Naruto also couldn't help but notice how her butt was so pressed hard into his pages. He also noticed her but seemed to have more size than those breaths she showed. Loona leaned back into Naruto and smiled as he started the engine. But as he was about to pull off, Naruto felt 2 massive murderous auras. Looking back at the house, he saw Stella and Octavia looking at him from 2 windows. Octavia was in her room, and Stella was near the kitchen. Note to self: sleep in the woods tonight. Naruto drove off, and Loona's tail slapped against his chest from the wind. Once they were on the main road, Naruto raced down the road. Naruto's smile grew as they rode on the road. Naruto wondered how far Loona would let him go, so taking his chances, Naruto rested his chin on her shoulder. Loona jumped a little, but I saw a smile and white of her eye out of the corner of my eye as I drove. I wonder. Naruto smiled before he lifted his head back up, and with a dark smile, Naruto bit the side of her ear with my 2 front canines. A sharp mmm came from Loona before Naruto stopped at a red light and dragged his fangs off her ear. Loona shivered from the attention, and Naruto thought he'd pushed enough for now. As he started to drive her, heard Loona muttering something, FTs. Naruto smiled, then let go of the right bar, grabbed her stomach, and shoved her more into him. Loona squirmed as Naruto held her to his body. Then spoke into her ear as he grabbed the handlebar again. I'm no tease. I just want to know what will get me stabbed or what will get those lips onto mine. Loona reached down and grabbed his thigh with her right hand. When they stopped at another red light, Loona turned and spoke, a blush on her face. All you had to do was ask if you really want something like that. Or you could just grab my butt and pin me against a wall alpha. Naruto blushed and decided that the first chance he got, this beach would howl for him. Soon enough, they pulled up to the office, and both noticed that Blitz's van wasn't there, and Naruto smiled. Naruto grabbed her hips before they got off the bike. He let his fangs come from behind his lips and slightly bit down her neck. Loona as her left leg kicked a little as she felt the jolts of pleasure from the shaped fangs. Loona grabbed him, and Naruto grabbed his swords with his tails before she jerked off the bike. Naruto knew he'd gotten himself into it and was happy about it this time. You're so lucky we have a nice couch. Naruto put his swords on his sides as she pulled him through the doors. Not wanting to wait, Naruto grabbed Loona's hips, slammed her against the wall, and had her paws off the floor. Loona looked at Naruto, shocked, but he moved in, eye glowing a dark crimson. You did say I could do this, so I am. Naruto used 4 of his tails to make a seat for Loona. Naruto ran his hands up Loona's sides and smiled as he cupped her face, looked at her red cheeks, and then looked into her white slit eyes. So, little hound, what was that you called me? An alpha. Loona blushed and looked away, too embarrassed to look Naruto in the eye. Naruto smiled, grabbed her side with one hand, and grabbed her cheek with his other hand. At this close, Naruto noticed she had human-like lips. Naruto smiled as he rubbed a thumb on her upper cheek. And Naruto. Naruto laughed before he leaned in, pressed his head to her, and made her look him in the eye. Naruto pressed his body more into her body. If I'm your alpha, then does that make you my pretty beach? Loona was turning a bright red. Naruto laughed before he decided to go in for the kill. Naruto cupped her other cheek and moved in and kissed Loona. Loona froze for a second before she threw her legs around Naruto's waist and grabbed his cheeks, holding him in place. Loona opened her mouth, and Naruto quickly took advantage. Naruto deepened the kiss, and Loona as she brushed her tongue against Naruto's fangs. Naruto lowered his hands, grabbed Loona's hips, and pulled her off his tails. Not wanting Naruto to move too much, Loona grabbed the back of his head, wrapped her arm around his neck, and grabbed onto the top of his vest. But, soon, they both needed air, so they had to break the kiss. Loona held tight to Naruto, her mouth open as she took a few deep breaths with her forehead pressed to Naruto's. Oh, my God. I can't believe you just dominated me like that, and I liked it. Naruto smiled as he threw her up a little, then grabbed her butt cheeks. Loona smiled before she spoke with a smile. Let's get to the office. Naruto smiled and let Loona down, and she grabbed Naruto's hand and then pulled her along to the elevator. Loona pulled Naruto into another deep kiss while they were in the elevator. Naruto hummed, then shoved her into the wall of the elevator wall. Naruto held onto her waist as they made out. Loona broke the kiss and smiled up at Naruto. She grabbed one of Naruto's hands and ran it up her stomach, and Loona rubbing her thighs together when he lightly dug his claws into her skin. Naruto smiled as he moved his tails around and ran 2 up her legs. But the ding came from the door before Naruto could do what he planned. They quickly pulled away from each other as 2 more female hellhounds walked in. The 2 looked at them and blushed as Naruto and Loona walked out of 2 of Naruto's tails on her. One wrapped around her waist and one around her tail. Loona quickly walked them to the office and unlocked the door. They walked in, and Naruto heard the door lock. Naruto turned and smiled as Loona grabbed his vest. Naruto smiled before he grabbed her waist and then threw her down on the couch. Naruto laughed as he unbuttoned his vest and shirt and left them open. Loona saw some scars on his chest, with a few on his shoulder. If anything we do makes you feel uncomfortable, tell me and I'll stop. Loona nodded, happy to know he at least wanted her to be comfortable. I don't have any rubbers. Naruto smiled as 4 tails moved over to Loona. Oh, don't worry about that, Loona. Things you're thinking about are better kept in the home or bedroom. I just thought maybe I'd see what my pretty beach likes. Naruto wrapped 2 tails around her arms and the other 2 around her waist. Naruto's smile widened, and he flashed his fangs as he pulled his right glove down. Naruto pulled her up with his tails, grabbed her cheek, and pushed her head up. Naruto opened his mouth and lightly bit down on her Adam's apple. He dragged his fangs back, and Naruto felt her whole body shiver. Then Naruto started to kiss his way down her neck but stopped at her shirt. He looked up at her face and saw her red face. Loona looked down at him and nodded. Okay. Naruto pulled back and smiled as he looked at her red face and saw her tongue hanging out of her mouth. Naruto's heightened sense of smell noticed a sweet smell in the air. Naruto looked down and saw a wet spot coming from her pages. Oh. I guess someone likes to be a SBMSSV beach. Naruto shoved his hand down her breathes and felt that she had no panties on. Naruto retraced his claws and rubbed 2 fingers over Loona's outer lips. Loona howled from the sudden STMLTN. But, as Naruto was about to do more to her, they heard the door handle shake. They froze before they heard Blitz's voice. The F. I didn't lock this door. Loona, are you in there? Naruto quickly set her down and she pulled her shirt down as Naruto buttoned his shirt. Loona cursed under her breath, grabbed a jacket off a chair, and tied it around her waist before she walked over, unlocked the door, and yelled. DMNIT Blitz, you had to come back now of all times. Blitzes looked confused until he saw Naruto buttoning up his vest. Blitz looked ready to kill Naruto, but Naruto looked Blitz in the eye, his gaze was full of rage. Blitz second-guessed attacking this kid knowing it meant losing more than his business. Naruto. Naruto looked past Blitz and saw Millie, one of his favorite imps of the pain games. Millie. Millie smiled before she rushed into the office and followed back a male imp. He had red skin and white freckles on his cheeks like many imps. His white hair leads to his curvy black and white striped horns. He also has a yellow scara with black slit pupils. He has a long thin red tail with a barb at the end and lanky digitigrade legs ending in cloven red hooves. He was dressed in a navy black coat with red buttons and white cuffs, black briefs, a white shirt with a black turtleneck, a large red bow tie, and fingerless gloves. Naruto. Oh, it's good to see you again. Naruto laughed before he dropped to a knee and hugged Millie before she pulled back and looked up at Naruto. DMN, sweetie, you've gotten big. Where were you? And the prince's family came last year but you didn't show up at the games. Naruto laughed as the male imp looked up at him. I've started taking contracts through Blitz there. I was helping Loona and him take out a few PP heads. Millie laughed, then she grabbed the imp beside her. She smiled as she rubbed her cheek on his. This is my Moxie. He's the finest singer and gun user in all the Pride Ring. Naruto smiled before he held a hand out to Moxie. A pleasure, Moxie. I hope you know you got one of the if not the toughest imps in all of hell. Even I have to second-guess a fight with her. Moxie smiled, glad to know someone else saw what great Millie was. He shook Naruto's hand before speaking. Thanks, sir, and I know. They let each other hands go. Before Naruto could talk again, his phone started to ring. He pulled his phone out and saw it was Stola calling. He picked up and heard crashing and screaming, but it was getting farther away. Naruto, my boy, you must hide for a few days. Octavia and Stella are tearing the palace apart and I don't know why. I'm heading to the vacation house down in Wrath AH. The call cut and Naruto heard him scream, and Naruto felt a chill run down his spine. Naruto put his phone away and then looked at everyone. Does anyone know a good hotel? Stolas said Octavia and Stella are going crazy. You're staying with me. Loona grabbed Naruto and then pulled him to the door. Hell, third POV. 40 minutes later, Loona looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. Naruto had told her he was off to get them something from the Asian bar around the corner. Loona smiled as she walked out of the bathroom with a towel wrapped around his neck and smiled at her clothes. She dressed in yoga shorts and a black tank top. I wonder if Naruto would like this, or should I just strp and wait on the bed? Loona stopped when she heard the door open. She smiled when Naruto walked in with 2 bags in his hand. One was from the bar, and the other was from the pharmacy down the street. Loona smiled and walked over, and took the bags. You can go relax, Naruto, my room on the right. Naruto thanked her, and he sat on the couch, took his boots and socks off, and sat them beside the couch. Naruto also wondered how long Octavia and Stella would be sad about something. You got the premium teriyaki chicken rice bowl with California roll. You remembered what I told you over 3 years ago. Naruto smiled as he looked over to open the kitchen. Well, the 2 of you are the only 2 I took the time to know beyond knowing the basics. You love any teriyaki, and I remember you getting California roll more than once. Loona laughed and then walked over with the food on trays. Naruto took the trays with 2 tails, let Loona sit down, and leaned into his side. Naruto held the trays up with his tails. They started eating, and Naruto wrapped an arm around Loona's waist and ate with his other hand. Loona's tail was wrapped around 2 of Naruto's. Loona finished her California rolls before she looked up at Naruto. Hey, can I ask you something? Naruto nodded as he chewed on a California roll. Loona set his fork down and pulled one of the condoms from the pharmacy bag from her top. You want to go at it here or in the bed? Lemon warning. Naruto blushed as she bit the edge of the wrapper. She looked at Naruto from the corner of her eye with a smile. Naruto put the food away and stood up. And Naruto. Naruto had her off the couch and on the floor in a flash. Naruto had Loona pinned to the floor on her back and used his 2 tails to hold her arms above her head. She was blushing again as Naruto slowly dragged his hand up her thigh and softly dug his claws in as her tank top's thin material started to tear. So you know, Beach, now that you've made that face, I'm not letting you get away. Loona shivered from the dark and powerful tone Naruto was using now. Naruto tore the last off the top. Naruto sat down and crossed his legs and sat Loona down in his lap. Loona wrapped her legs around Naruto's waist, and Naruto let her arms go before he grabbed Loona's but with one hand and held her back with the other. Loona and grabbed Naruto's face as Naruto pushed more into the kiss. Naruto dug his claws into Loona's butt and back, then started to smell that sweet scent again. Naruto slowly dragged his hand away from her but claws, leaving lines in her fur. When he was at the top of her thigh, Naruto retracted his claws before he shoved his hand into her yoga shorts. Loona broke the kiss and let out a loud howl as Naruto shoved 2 fingers into her. Naruto used a little of his demon energy and sent sparks of weak electricity into Loona's body when he shoved another alpha. The sudden shock sent Loona over the edge, and Naruto was surprised at how sensitive Loona actually was. Naruto pulled his hand out and wrapped his arms around Loona's legs and back. Naruto used a tail to grab the condom off the floor and walked to Loona's room. Naruto opened the door and ignored the room for now as he walked straight for the bed. Loona started returning to her senses as Naruto laid her on the bed. Alpha. Naruto smiled, ran a hand over her stomach, then used 2 tails to grab her yoga shorts. Same as earlier, anything you don't like, let me know. Loona nodded, and Naruto pulled her shorts off and saw she was more human there too. Naruto saw she was dripping and smiled, wanting to try what he'd heard stories of when he stole food while in the red light district. Naruto got his vest and shirt off quickly, and Loona blushed now that she got to look at the full view of Naruto's chest. She was right about the scares, but she had a hard time noticing he had a larger-than-normal chest, broad shoulder muscles, and a set of six-pack she'd only ever seen in magazines or on TV. She blinked when Naruto got on a knee and opened her legs more. Suddenly feeling shy, Loona covered herself with her hands and tail. Now Loona, a beach shouldn't try to hide. Using 6 of his tails, Naruto kept her legs spread, arms pulled back, one to hold her tail down and one around the collar on her neck, and pulled her head up to make her watch. Naruto grabbed her butt cheeks and pulled her to the edge of the bed. Naruto hummed as he moved his hands around, avoiding her lower lips, and heard her start whimpering. Loona tried to move her legs as Naruto played with her. Such smooth fur, with such thick and lovely curves. Loona whimpered more as Naruto lowered his hands and rubbed his hand near her lips. Naruto then kissed her stomach and started to go lower. Loona as Naruto got to her outer lips. Naruto kissed right above her lips before moving to her thigh, and he smiled as Loona struggled with the tails holding her legs. Naruto grabbed Loona's thighs as she struggled to move her legs around. Naruto was surprised at how sensitive Loona was at first, but he wanted to test different areas of STMLTN. Once Loona was good and wet, Naruto pulled his head from between her thighs then, in one quick motion, Naruto shoved his tongue into her. Loona screamed when Naruto scratched her inner lips with his fangs. Sweet fluids gushed, and Naruto pulled back, DMN, Loona. That's a great taste you go. Here try it. Naruto yanked her up while her mind was still out of it. Naruto grabbed her face and let her legs and tail go, then used his two tails to hold her arms behind her back. Naruto kissed Loona the second her mind cleared. Loona, on instinct, opened her mouth and got a taste of her own fluids as she quickly ran her tongue over Naruto's fangs. Naruto was quickly getting his breathes and boxers off. It was a beach breaker at 14 inches and 2 wide. Holy Lucifer. That thing is going to break me. Naruto's evil smile returned as he spoke as he held her cheek. Well, you are a young pretty beach, so I guess I'll just have to break you in. Once we're a little older, you're going to carry my pups for me. Loona turned red, and the sweet smell of her arousal got even stronger as Loona's face turned red. Naruto didn't understand why, but he was really getting off on Loona's submissiveness and hoped Octavia would be just as SBMSSV. Naruto held the condom up and bit the edge before he ripped the top off. I'll get it. Naruto looked at Loona and saw her smile, then made an O with her mouth. Naruto smiled and let her hands and collar go. Loona grabbed the condom, got on her knees, and put the condom to her lips. She grabbed Naruto's and started to slowly put the condom on. While she tried not to choke. This is the first time she's done this. Loona could only get 6 inches before she had to pull back. She coughed the head, having hit the back of her throat. Naruto laughed and ran a hand through Loona's hair. Sorry Alpha, I guess I'll just have to practice, and held her butt out to Naruto. Loona got onto her hands and knee and shook her butt a little. She looked back at Naruto and, with a red race, spoke. Come on Alpha, you have a beach to break in. Naruto grabbed her waist with one hand as he stepped closer and pressed. But before he did anything, Naruto spoke. Are you sure Loona? You know once this is done there is no going back. Loona was shocked. She was presented to him, and he was still thinking of her before his pleasure. Loona had hearts in her as she looked at her Alpha. Break your beach Alpha. Naruto smiled and started to push in. When his head slipped in, Loona let out a shaped gasp, and she felt like she was being ripped open. She grunted, and Naruto knew this would wrap 3 of his tails together, and moved them to her left hand. Loona seeing the offer, grabbed the offered tails as Naruto pushed in fast and buried 9 inches into her. Loona let out a loud and long scream. It hurt Naruto when he heard that scream, but he knew this was just a momentary thing. Naruto gave one more hard move and shoved the rest in. Loona screamed, and Naruto winced from how tightly she held his tails. Naruto waited there for a second, waiting for her body to stretch out. DMN it, why does this have to hurt so much the first time? Naruto leaned over, and Loona growled at the movement but smiled when Naruto started to rub her lower stomach, trying to help soothe the pain. After a minute, the pain faded, and her grip on Naruto's tails lessened. Naruto kissed the back of her neck and then her shoulder. It's okay, Naruto, I promise I'm okay. You can move. Naruto waited a few more seconds before nodding and straightening his back. Naruto slowly pulled out, and when he was halfway out, Naruto pushed back in. Naruto his body experiencing some new. The heat and tightness were amazing to Naruto. On the other hand, Loona had never felt so full, no complete in her life. Each slow, steady move of Naruto's hips sent waves of pain and pleasure up her spine. But after a few minutes, Naruto was bounding into Loona. Loona was moving her body back, meeting each move as the pain faded into full pleasure. Naruto leaned over Loona and held onto her stomach while his other hand held her throat and her tight to his body. Loona, you're so tight. Loona in response as her mind focused solely on pleasing her alpha and herself. But, all too soon, Naruto felt his coming. Loona, I'm getting close. Loona's ears perked up at those, and she doubled her pace. She'd already come twice and was close again. Loona wrapped her tail around Naruto's waist, and her tongue fell out of her mouth as her mind started to fade again. After another minute, Naruto slammed into Loona, and she howled. Still, her mind flashed with an image of her holding a red fox-tailed puppy in her arms. The two relaxed and fell onto Loona's bed. The two huffed, but Naruto pulled out of a still huffing Loona after a minute. For her part, Loona snuggled into her alpha's side as they lay on the bed. She'd be the mother of his pups and would make sure any other beach he took knew that she was his first. 2 days later Naruto pulled back from his last kiss from Loona for the last time today. He felt like he'd overstayed his welcome but left some money for the set-off blitz. Loona had made him sleep in the office for the last 3 days. Now, he was returning to the palace hoping Octavia and Stella had gotten everything out of their system. He also wished to stay a little longer. Loona and Naruto had been almost non-stop. And now he would have to walk into a hornet's nest that he may have to run. When he walked out, he felt like he was being watched. The hair on the back of his neck stood up, and Naruto jumped up, looked down, and saw Stolas coming out of a shadow. Naruto landed on a car and sighed as he looked at Stolas. You scared the out of me. And how the did you do that? Stolas sighed as he walked over and sat down on the car trunk. Naruto jumped down. As Stolas spoke. I wanted to get you so I only have to deal with Stella's rage. As Octavia friend I was going by her kindness back with you. Stolas grabbed Naruto and opened a portal. Naruto froze before he was thrown through the portal and skipped across the ground. A second later, Stolas walked through with Naruto's bike. Naruto groaned as he stood up, holding his head. Naruto. Naruto froze at Octavia's voice and felt fear shoot up his spine. Naruto turned his head and saw Octavia looking down at Naruto from her bedroom window, and she looked mad. Naruto, not wanting to take his chances, jumped into the trees. Naruto hadn't had to use the skills he learned from the scrolls and his demonic chakra to rush through the trees. Naruto wasn't stupid enough to deal with a set-off woman. He stopped after a few minutes of running. Naruto jumped high into a tree and sat down. He would talk to Octavia after she calmed down. Naruto. Naruto jumped and looked down at the ground. Octavia and Stolas coming out of the shadow of the trees. In Stolas's hand was his book. That book. Octavia glared up at Naruto. Get down here now. Naruto flinched as Stolas slipped back into a shadow. Naruto planned to get back at him later. Naruto. What did you do with Loona? Naruto sighed as he looked back at Octavia and figured he'd have to play this right to make things go his way. What I do with Loona is none of your business, Octavia. Besides, I like Loona and you didn't help me with that. Octavia glared at him as he spoke. What is that supposed to mean? Naruto jumped down and landed in front of Octavia. Naruto leaned down a little and looked her in the eye, ready to get her and get some frustration out. I can't even act on it. Sure, Loona did the same, but you know what? I can do stuff with her without shadow-walking father who'd take my head if I touched her. Look, the two of you are both the best and worst of my life sometimes. At least I got some relief with Loona. Octavia blinked and looked away, and rubbed her arm. She knew he was telling the truth but didn't want to admit it. Her anger and jealousy were gone now that she knew Naruto wanted her, but he thought he couldn't touch her body. She also didn't know if she should hate Loona for taking Naruto's virginity or to be jealous that Naruto had taken her first. It's Naruto, I'm sorry I just. Look, you're my closest friend, and it hurt to see you just leave with her and then spend days with her. Tears started to come to her eyes, and Naruto stiffened, not expecting the tears. I mean, I know that you like Loona a lot, but am I here too? Naruto, unprepared for the emotions, sighed and pulled Octavia into a hug. Octavia wrapped her arms around Naruto, not wanting to let him go. Naruto ran a hand down her back and held her head with his other hand. Naruto sighed as Octavia buried her head into Naruto's chest, hiding her tears and the blush. I was going to show my resolve when you came back, but I guess it's too late for that. Naruto decided to throw the mind games out at the broken tone. Well, no, I don't think you know a couple of things. I got a letter from Lucifer that told me about a law that lets the sole survivor of a noble house marry more than one woman. I planned on talking with you and Loona both about it, but well, this all happened. Octavia looked up at Naruto for a second, then jumped up, grabbed him, and took him to the ground. Octavia grabbed Naruto's collar and started to shake him. Are you telling me we've been competing for 2 years for nothing? Naruto, very quickly having enough, decided to take control. Naruto grabbed Octavia's wrists and flipped her over onto her back. Naruto smiled down at her, and Octavia blushed harder as she looked up at Naruto. Well, I didn't get the letter until last week, to be honest. But, I just didn't know how to bring it up without you two suddenly thinking there was a top spot. Now, I need to have this talk with Loona too, but that can wait. Naruto flashed his fangs as he looked down at Octavia's neck. Let's see if he's SBMSSV to me. Naruto leaned down, and Octavia blushed when his fangs touched her neck. Naruto let Octavia's wrist go and pulled Octavia up as he softly chewed on her neck. Octavia cooed from the new STMLTN, put a hand on the back of Naruto's head, and pushed him into her neck more. Octavia loved the attention Naruto was giving her. Naruto dug his fangs into Octavia's skin, and Octavia gasped as her feathers fluffed out. Surprised, Naruto jerked his head back and spit out a small feather. Octavia blushed as she looked at Naruto. Octavia jumped on Naruto and grabbed his cheeks before she pushed forward and locked lips with Naruto before they fell back onto the ground. Octavia had waited years for this and wouldn't let Naruto go until satisfied. For his part, Naruto wasn't ready for Octavia to be this aggressive. Still, he was going to make her SBMSSV to him. Naruto grabbed Octavia's hips and flipped them as Octavia opened her mouth, and Naruto took control. Naruto picked her up like a bride, and the kiss broke before Naruto jumped into the trees again. Naruto. Naruto smiled as he raced them through the trees, then raced along the ground when he hit a gap. Something like what you and I are about to do is best to do in a bedroom. Naruto jumped back into the trees while Octavia smiled as she looked up at Naruto, still smiling as he jumped onto the house's roof. My room or yours? Naruto smiled as he walked over to his side of the house. Naruto looked over and saw his balcony doors were still open. Naruto jumped down onto the balcony. Naruto entered his room and closed and locked the door with his tails. Naruto smiled before he set Octavia down on the bed. Octavia quickly pulled her jacket off as Naruto got his weapons belt off. Naruto smiled as he looked over at Octavia. She wore a nice shirt, torn tight blue jeans, and black leather boots. Octavia already had double D cups at her age, and he smiled as he imagined what she could grow into later. Naruto quickly got his vest and shirt off. Oh my! Octavia looked at Naruto as she looked at his chest. Octavia pressed a hand to his abs and ran her hands on them. Octavia almost always slept next to Naruto but had not seen his chest since first meeting him. She was amazed at how his body had developed. Naruto smiled before speaking up and ran a hand through her head feathers. Octavia moved her up his chest, and she smiled before she pulled her hand away and then pulled her shirt off as she stood up. She had on a bright red BR with lace at the edges. He also saw she had on a bright red thong. Naruto smiled before he grabbed her cheeks and started to kiss her again. After a second, Octavia opened her mouth, and Naruto attacked. Lemon starred Octavia into the kiss as Naruto moved her hands to her butt and slipped them into her briefs. Naruto felt that her feathers were thinning and getting smooth. His hands went. Naruto pulled his hand out, grabbed her hips, and pulled Octavia off her feet. Naruto wrapped two tails under her legs to help support her. Octavia deepened the kiss as Naruto moved his hands and got the boots off her. Octavia broke the kiss and used her beak to nip at Naruto as he needed her butt. "You seem to like buttes more than tips." Octavia screamed when Naruto suddenly moved in, and his claws dug into her skin. Octavia from the contact, and Naruto propped himself up and looked down at Octavia's red face. "DMN, your red face is really DMN cute, Octavia." Octavia looked away as Naruto ran a hand over Octavia's stomach. Naruto smiled as he found out she would submit to him. Naruto unbuttoned the front of her jeans and stopped. Octavia looked Naruto in the eye and saw he was smiling. "If anything makes you feel uncomfortable or you want me to stop, just say so." Octavia nodded, and Naruto used his tails and pulled her breathes down. Octavia blushed as Naruto pulled her thong off and looked at her wet folds. Octavia had a more tangy scent to her, not sweet like Loona. Naruto smiled then like he did with Loona. He used two tails to open her legs, grabbed her thighs, and shoved his tongue into her. He wanted her as wet as he could get her. Naruto. Octavia grabbed the back of Naruto's head and tried to push him deeper into her. Naruto thought she tasted like a slightly unripe fruit, but it wasn't bad. Naruto dug his claws into her thighs when Octavia yanked on his hair. Octavia screamed a second later as fluid gushed from her. Naruto hummed when Octavia let his hair go. He leaned back up and looked down at Octavia's flushed face. Naruto pulled her up with his tails and pulled her into another kiss. Octavia's eyes widened when she tasted herself, but she didn't care. She wrapped her arms around Naruto's neck. Octavia pushed more into the kiss and when she felt his tails tighten around her thighs. They broke the kiss, and Octavia's eyes glowed as she looked at her Naruto. "Do you have a condom?" Naruto nodded, then used a tail to grab his briefs. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a condom, with two more falling out. Octavia laughed and moved her hands and cupped his cheek, making him look at her. "When the three of us move into your palace, you'll need a lot more of those until we have the finances to have little ones." Naruto laughed as he ripped open the condom and put it on as Octavia started to move her hips a little. She was nervous seeing Naruto's size, but she was excited. After a second, Naruto grabbed her hips, lifted her up, and lined up with Octavia's opening. "This is going to hurt, right?" Naruto nodded, and Octavia braced herself. Naruto then let her weight drop suddenly, and Octavia screamed as her weight forced her more than halfway down. Then with one savage move, Naruto slammed the rest of the way in. Octavia dug her claws into Naruto's back and bit down on Naruto's shoulder. Naruto growled as he felt the pain in his shoulder and tightness around his SSHT. Octavia yelled and wrapped her legs around Naruto's waist, keeping him still while she adjusted. After a few seconds, the pain started to fade, and Naruto realized Octavia wasn't going to be able to take as hard of AF like Loona could, nor was she as sensitive. But, she was much tighter than Loona. Naruto groaned, and once Octavia's legs loosened, Naruto pulled Octavia up and then slammed her back down. Octavia screamed into his shoulder, and Naruto quickly realized she was a screamer. Naruto started a slow rhythm, and Octavia louder as Naruto started to speed up. Octavia's claws started to draw BLD as she dragged them up his back. Naruto wrapped a tail around Octavia's feathered tail. Octavia pulled her beak from Naruto's shoulder and then kissed Naruto again. "Lucifer, these girls are incredible." Octavia broke the kiss and looked at Naruto. Naruto looked at her glowing red eyes and her red face. Her eyes closed, and Naruto felt her getting tighter. Naruto groaned and noticed his own end was getting close. Naruto dropped Octavia onto his bed, planted his hands on either side of her chest, and started moving even harder into Octavia. She screamed from the rougher move, and Naruto slammed deep into her and blew his load. Octavia's eyes rolled back, and her mind was gone. Naruto pulled out once she let go, and Naruto picked Octavia up and then laid her back down with her head on a pillow. Naruto sighed, got into bed behind her, wrapped an arm over her, and used his tails to cover her body. Octavia sighed and let her body relax as Naruto held her. Lemon and Naruto and Octavia lay in bed, falling asleep, but neither noticed a pair of glowing red eyes from the shadows. Then a soft annoyed feminine groan before they vanished, and Stella stepped out of the shadow next to Naruto's room. Stella couldn't believe she envied the her daughter just had. She groaned as she felt her lower lips quivering. That spark of the boy after the award ceremony lit in her had grown into an inferno after seeing that. Stella started to quickly walk down the hall to get in a cold bath to put that heat out and to try and get that boy out of her head. He was only 15 for Lucifer's sake. Stella stopped and punched the wall before she grabbed the PP of her dress, her arousal starting to cloud her mind, it. Stella punched the wall a few more times.